Hi, everyone. We are now in week 7 of the 2019 spring semester. Um, Before I get started talking about this week's readings, though, I want to go ahead and say something about everybody's grades. It's amazing to me how for the first 5 weeks or so, nobody had any family emergencies. Nobody was sick. Well, maybe a couple people were sick, but nobody had any family emergencies. The only problem was people getting textbooks. And then magically, as soon as I put the zeros in the grade book for work that's not been turned in, all of a sudden, family emergency. And I don't mean one or two people, I mean a sizable number of people. I think about 2 people told me what those emergencies were, and they seemed pretty legit. But in my 9 years of teaching, I've learned that anytime somebody says, "Oh, family emergency is why I didn't do my work," and they can't tell me what it is, usually there was no family emergency. So if I don't believe you, it's not anything personal. It's just that I've seen this movie before, and I know that's a bad pun on last night's Oscars, but I've seen this before, and so my skepticism is well earned over a period of years. So I don't reopen quizzes anymore. I was nice enough about it because of the textbook problems, but from now on, even if you can't turn in an essay one week, you need to get those quizzes done because I will not be reopening them again unless it truly is some kind of a medical emergency or family emergency that you can actually tell me what it is. So that's it on the grades. If you're behind, you got to get caught up. If you're really behind, we are almost halfway through the semester now, and you're going to have a decision to make because I think the drop deadline is coming up pretty soon. So if you are so far behind that you feel like you can't do an entire half a semester's worth of work, dropping out may not be the answer you want to hear, but it may be the best option to preserve your grade point average, and maybe you can try this again in the fall. All right. This week's readings, we are in the Industrial Revolution. Almost nothing in the history of mankind has had a bigger impact on our lives today than the Industrial Revolution has. What the Industrial Revolution was it was a time when the world went from an agrarian economy, particularly places like England and, of course, eventually later the United States, but went from an economy based on farming and agriculture to an economy based on manufacturing and factories. And that's when the 9-to-5 jobs started, and that's when a lot of the pollution started. And that's when a lot of the high points and the low points based on manufacturing really started to take place. And what started the Industrial Revolution was really a perfect storm, and it really got its beginnings in England. And if you look at the slideshow, you'll see a long list of reasons where if any one of those things was different, there may not have been an Industrial Revolution. But because everything worked out so perfectly, we now rely on manufactured goods and manufactured foods and manufactured everything to live our lives. There's a good side to the Industrial Revolution. The fact that you can actually take a class online and watch me on your computer or your tablet or your phone or however you're watching this is one of the upsides to Industrial Revolution. There's no doubt that we're now living longer. There's no doubt that the quality of our life is better. There's no doubt that I certainly would not want to go back and live in a time where I had to rely on growing my own food and building my own house with my own hands and stuff like that in order to survive. And so there's the good side of that. But there's a real dark side to the Industrial Revolution and a real dark side to industrialism that really is still applicable today. Child labor being one of the biggest ones. And pollution and climate change being another one. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this week's readings with the Industrial Revolution, you're going to read the introduction to it. Then you're going to read Thomas Babington Macaulay's review of Salington's book. And in it, he talks about how, life expectancy is better. The taxes are lower in the industrial areas than they are in the rural areas. And he's going to talk about all the pluses for industrialism and talk about why it's such a good thing. The dark side gets shown in Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Cry of the Children poem. People say, oh, art is art, it doesn't influence anything. But the truth is, a lot of times art can be extremely influential, and art can bring about some social change. And one of the best examples of that we're going to see this semester is this week's poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, The Cry of the Children, where she discusses child labor and the horrifying conditions that these children have to endure from industrialism. The companion piece to that is an actual report by the Child Employment Commission, where these men from the government went in and looked at factories and looked at like coal mines and looked at the conditions these kids worked in and realized that these children were basically being abused for the benefit of the factory owners or the benefit of the mine owners. And it was horrifying. And the truth, though, is that not a lot of people read the commission report's report on the child labor. But because Elizabeth Barrett Browning was a celebrity, she decided to use that celebrity to write this poem, Cry of the Children, and that did inspire big changes. And the changes came slowly. You know, they didn't immediately put a stop to child labor, but they raised the age from like 5 years old up to 10 years old, and they set, like, I think, a minimum wage for the kids. And eventually, over time, because the factory owners are arguing we need these kids to make profits. So over time, we finally got to a place where child labor is not so bad in places like England and the United States. However, make no mistake about it, there are still parts of the world where children are exploited for their labor and getting paid peanuts while the corporations that own those factories are making billions of dollars. But that's not what this week's lesson is about. This week's lesson is about the child labor and the horrors of it during the Industrial Revolution in England. So take a look at that. Take a look at, comparing Macaulay to the commission report to The Cry of the Children. And I think you're going to find this week's lesson very enlightening. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or contact me some other way.